Muchas gracias a Nadia, Claudio, and Elisa for such great interventions. I think you've said it all, really. You know, you've covered very, very important points, and the idea that we need to know what happened to for this not to happen again, and to build a better future for society and democracy in general, like Claudio mentioned, is key, and that's actually exactly what the tribunal is about. So I'm so happy that both Melissa and Claudio gave those presentations, because they completely complete what I'm going to talk about now. It's also great to be, in the company of students, or president of the student movement, lawyers, activists, journalists, because I think that if you put those strengths together, the lawyers, the activists, the students, the journalists, the battle would be, won a lot easier. The student movement is key, and in all, in the history of struggles, the students have always been very, very important. And when you think about Vietnam, when you think about, May '68 in France, when you think about right now about Palestine, what's happening in US campuses, what's happening in Europe, and in particular in the UK, the students have been quite often with the workers the motor, the engine of the solidarity and of the struggle. So once again, I'm very happy to share the panel with you three today. I've been here for 5 days now, and I haven't had time to sort of travel around that much or discover Chile that much, but what I saw touched me in a very deep way. And I was at Via Grimaldi yesterday, and again, Claudio mentioned the importance of such places, the duty of memory, the duty for the people to be educated about what happened in the past, to make sure that this doesn't happen ever again in the future. And Via Grimaldi was, I'm sure a lot of you have been, I hope you've been, it's a very eerie and haunting place. It's very beautiful. But such horrors, have taken place there. And while, I had my little MP3 thing, listening to the commentary, and the more I heard about the horrors that Chileans and actually a lot of young Chileans had to face, the link with Palestine became clearer and clearer. And I was also at the Museo de la Memoria a lunes, and it's the same, when you see the suffering of a people. But when also what was like touching was the solidarity that you can see both actually at Via Grimaldi, because the stuff I was listening to said that even if the prisoners were blindfolded and often handcuffed, they developed between them a means to show solidarity between one another. And I think, and El Museo de la Memoria is the same thing. All the posters from France, from Japan, from the US, from Italy, that showed worldwide solidarity with the people's struggle. I think it's what keeps us going. Without the solidarity, we are nothing. And it's something that we need in our daily lives too. It doesn't have to be a huge struggle. And this solidarity, this union between people from various walks of life and various countries is what should and makes me anyway very hopeful about the future. Even if it's very dark, the present is very dark, but we also have the seeds to build a much better future. And I think that Palestine right now has become such a symbolic question for this reason. The fact that what's happening in Palestine with the impunity of Israel that commits violation of international law on a daily basis, and not only it actually gets rewarded while committing all those violations. When you see the struggle of the Palestinian people on the ground, the struggle of people in Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, in the diaspora, in the refugee camps, the sumud, there's this Arabic word, sumud, which means steadfastness. The fact that despite all the troubles, despite all the wars, despite all the bombings, despite the torture, despite the arrest, despite the desaparecidos, they continue to struggle. And that's what scares Israel. Israel is like this monster that, hit them harder and harder and harder every year. But still, they look Israel right in the eye, and they have the fist up, and they say, we're here and we're here to stay. And that's what should give us hope about the future, because Palestine, even though it's a symbol of what is wrong with the world, it's also a symbol, thanks to the solidarity and the international solidarity, of what is beautiful with the world. People, walking hand by hand for a common cause. So the idea of the Russell Tribunal on Palestine is in a way the same that the tribunal in Vietnam in the late 60s did, the tribunal in Latin America. Actually, I don't know if many of you are aware that there was a Russell Tribunal on Latin America in 1975, so 2 years after the coup and the murder of Salvador Allende. And the tribunal focused on military governments in Chile, but also in Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and I think that's it. And there are lots of documentation actually about this tribunal. A book has been published a while ago as well, and I was reading actually this book on the plane, and again to see the links between what I'm talking about now, Palestine, and Chile at the time. When you talk about Palestine, and again, you have to remain hopeful because the struggle, they keep going on the ground. But I'll give you a brief sort of update on the situation on the ground. I'm sure many of you already know what's happening on the ground, but Jerusalem, for example, one of the holiest city for 3 religions at least, has become really the symbol of Israel turning into an apartheid state. East Jerusalem, which is due to be the capital of a future Palestinian state, is being Judaized every day. And I'm not using, I'm using the words of the Israeli government, the Judaization of Jerusalem. I'm not making this up. The government, that's the way they call that. Settlers are being put into East Jerusalem. Palestinians are being kicked out of their houses by settlers with the support of the army. Palestinians are actually more and more scared of going out at night. You've heard what happened, the Palestinian Mohammed Abu Gdir, who was burnt alive a few months ago. Palestinians are getting beaten up. There was also a case of a Palestinian recently working in a hotel that got beaten up by Israeli Jews. There is a very, the Israeli society is getting more and more paranoid, more and more radical, and therefore its actions are getting more and more violent. And it's a very worrying aspect when you talk about, if you look at the history of struggle, the history of wars, and the history of massacres, it often starts with a society feeling so closed and so unsafe and so radical that it can permit, in a way, its state or its army to do the craziest things. The Christian minority also in Palestine, and a lot of people focus on, think Palestine is about Muslims and Jews. Christians obviously lived in Palestine for many, many years, thousands of years. The Christian minority is fleeing Palestine now. There was 3.4% of Christians in Palestine about 10 years ago. There's now 2.1% of Christians in Palestine. So this to show again that it's a global problem. It's not about religion, and it's about a whole people. There was a report from Amnesty International also yesterday that, and Claudio mentioned also the work of organizations like Amnesty that reported that Amnesty committed war crimes. And the important thing in this report, and that's what we have to remember about Israel, is that those are not like random actions or made by sort of a few bad apples. People often talk about, a soldier went a bit crazy, but the whole army is the most moral army in the world. Those actions, and Amnesty International talked about this very clearly. There is a pattern of those actions. It's institutionalized, and it's actually coming from high up. It's not just a few soldiers killing Palestinians. The orders are very clear. So before, I focus more on the Palestine Tribunal. I'd like to show a quick video and maybe most of you have seen it, to understand the level of destruction that has happened in Gaza over the last, during the last summer. It's like 1 minute long, but it's quite clear. So I don't know if, yeah.